Can you hear me now? All right. So all that, all that I said. All right. So last time we learned how to write our first program, and just to review, we have this. Say for example, we have an empty class, an empty program, or empty file. The first thing we have to write is public class, then whatever we want to name it. I'm going to name this lecture. I think we're on lecture 5. All right. So we have that. The next thing we need to write is our main, public static void main string args.
Sorry to interrupt, Professor. You said that we can do this with you on which program is it?
JGrasp, or you can do it online. I just Googled Java Visualizer.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that's our first things we need to do on every program we write. We need to have a class, public class, and then we name it whatever we want. So lecture 5 is just a name. However, when it comes to the main, we must have it in this format. All right. Public static void main string args. It must be in that format, okay? And when we talk about arrays later, this will make more sense. But right now, just know these are arguments that you can send from the console. So if we ran our program from the command line, we can pass in arguments from the command line, but we'll talk about that later on. If we want to just print out to the console something very simple, system.out.println, and whatever we want to say. I want to say hello world. Typically, that's the first program you ever learn how to do. And here we go. This is pretty much our whole program. It says hello world, and that's it. So let's visualize this. We're on this first line. Again, any program you write, it always goes to our main. That's why it's required. We print out hello world. Cool. Cool. Now, how do we read from the console? So say, for example, we put something down here. How do we read into our program? So if you all install JGrasp, JGrasp will look something like this. This is what we did last time, if you recall. Then we run our program, it comes out down here. However, what if I want to type something into my program, right? I want to type something from the console, then my program read that. That's what we'll talk about today. So if I type something down here, how do I get my program to read this nonsense that I just typed? All right, that's what we'll talk about. All right, reading from the console, we'll also talk about something called variables, where we can store data into our program. We'll also touch on naming conventions. So how do we name our variables? How do we name our classes? All right, so to read from the console, you need a scanner object. All right, think of it like a scanner object scans in from the console. And this is how you write scanner input. Input is the name, equals new is a keyword, scanner. Then we're telling our scanner to read from the system.in. System.in, that means we're reading in from the console. So if you think about it here, we're doing system.out, we're printing out to the console. So the inverse of that is system.in. We're reading in from the console. All right. The scanner object is a built-in library. It is in Java. It's already built into the framework or the JDK that we installed, if you were able to install it. So whatever Java environment you're in, that scanner is a part of it. So we can use it. Again, system.in tells us that we're reading in from the console. In programming 2, you'll learn how to read from files. And so right here, a file would go here so that we can read a file. So maybe like a text file or a config file. However, for our purposes, we're reading in from the console, so we put system.in. All right. Once we create our object, there's a couple methods you can use. And I'm going to go through each one of these with more detail, but just so you know, the next method gets the next word, all right, from the console, one word at a time. The next line method gets the whole line. It reads the whole line instead of just one word at a time. Next double, a double is something that is a number with a decimal point. So next double will read in a decimal point number. However, that value it reads in you must know it's going to be a decimal or you'll get an error. Same thing with next int. Next int reads in a whole number. Integer is a whole number. So that next value must be a whole number or you'll get an error. If it's a decimal number, you'll get an error. So let's see what I'm talking about. So again, we have our public class welcome, our public static void main, okay? I create my scanner, like the line I showed before. Then I'm gonna go through each one of these lines, okay? So input is the name of my scanner, and I'm calling input.next. So my little scanner, I wanna get the next word. Then input.next line, I wanna get the rest of the line. All right, let's go through this. So the first line, we create our scanner, okay? And we're naming it input, scanner input, we name it input. Then we say input.next. It literally gets the next word, so hello. So this is our console, we get hello. Input.next line would then get the rest of this line. So it gets hello, then it gets the rest of the line, programming class. If we do input.next line again, we're going to get the whole next line. If we do input.next, we're going to get the next word. All right, is that making sense so far? All right, I have a lot more examples to go through, so don't worry. So in Java, we have identifiers, which are basically the names of our variables. So input is an identifier, right? That's basically the name of our variable. We have classes. So if you look back, public class welcome, welcome is the name of our class or the identifier. All right. We have classes, we have variables. We'll talk about variables in a second. And we have methods. We'll talk about methods later on. But methods have identifiers either. Everything has a unique name, right? Identifier is basically the name. Public class Mustang is a name or identifier. String make is the identifier, is the name. Scanner input is the identifier. And using that identifier, I can then call these methods, okay? It's a sequence of letters that a sequence of characters that consists of letters, digits, underscores, dollar signs. But note, the first character must be a letter. It can't be a number or anything else. It must be a letter, okay? You cannot use true, false, or null. Those are keywords in Java, so it has to be something other than those. And when you write these identifiers, each subsequent word in that identifier must be capitalized. So what do I mean? For example, let's go to the visualizer. So lecture 5, right? Let's say I want to name it something else. I actually want to write out the name, the word 5. So I would do lecture, then capitalize the first letter of the next word, right? Lecture 5, minute 13. Notice each word in this identifier is capitalized, right? Oh crap. So lecture is capitalized, 5 is capitalized, minute capitalized, and 13 is capitalized, okay? That's just a Java naming convention. it helps with, you know, portability and readability on the part of somebody else who comes along. Lecture 5. All right. Each subsequent word is capitalized. For this method up here, we have get VIN number. So with methods and variables, which is what we'll talk about, the very first letter is lowercase, and then each subsequent one is capitalized. For classes, every word is capitalized. Okay. And then these are just some Java keywords. You don't really have to know all of these. I just want to put them up here because if you try to use them in a name or as a name, you'll get an error. So these are just some keywords, and we'll actually learn a lot of these throughout the class. But just know if you try to use these as a name, you'll get an error. It's a Java keyword. You can't use them. All right, so let's talk about variables. What are variables? How do we use variables? What's the purpose of them? So a variable basically is used to store data, whatever that data is, whether it's a number, it's a letter, it's a word, whatever it is. We use variables to store some type of data in our program so that we can use it later. Okay. And here are the different data types. We have a byte, which we talked about. A byte is 8 bits. Then you have shorts, which over here you can see are 16 bits. We have integers. We use integers for whole numbers. Then there's a long. A long is for a very big integer. And just notice an int is 32 bits, a long is 64 bits. A float is 32 bits, a double is 64 bits. So that just means it can hold more numbers. A float is for decimal numbers, a double is for decimal numbers, a char is for one individual character, so like an A, a B, or a C, whatever. A string is for if you have one or more characters. So if you have a word, if you have a sentence, a paragraph, you know, a whole book, you can store it in a string. I don't know about a whole book, that's kind of big, but a paragraph you can store in a string. But you see all these different data types. We're mainly focused on these 3. And these are the 3 that you'll see me use throughout the class. Integers, doubles, and strings. That's it. Those are the 3 you have to focus on. And those are the 3 that we'll use, and typically you'll use the most as well, even beyond this class. Okay. So how do we declare a variable? So basically create it. How do we create a variable? Well, we do the data type and then the identifier. So string name, or string line, I'm sorry. The data type, identifier. Line is just a name. I can name this whatever I want. It could be line 14 if I want. It could be, I don't know, paperclip. It doesn't matter. That's the identifier, but the data type does matter. String does matter. All right. And again, we do this so that we can store whatever we want, store some type of data in our program so that we can use later. So if you remember before, when we created our scanner object and we read in from the console, we kind of just read it in and it went off somewhere. We didn't store it anywhere. So now let's store it. So again, we declare a variable line, string line, and there's variable assignment. So basically we can set line equal to something. So here we're setting line equal to input.next, line equal to input.next line. Again, this is the same thing that we did before, except now we're actually going to store what we read into a variable. So those are all variable assignments. We're setting whatever our line equal to this stuff on the right side. So in Java and any programming language, it takes the right side, stores it on the left side. So input.next is going to be stored into line. Input.next line is going to be stored into line, so on and so forth. Okay. So let's see what this looks like. So again, if you remember, this is our console. And we're going to say line equals this, line equals that, so on and so forth. Here's our memory over here. So we go to our first statement. We're going to create our line. You see line equals null right now. Null just means that it has no value. We haven't set it equal to anything yet. We create our scanner. Then we set line equal to input.next. So you see here, line now equals hello. The next one, line now equals programming class. Line now equals my name is Professor Brown. Line equals this. So we're storing this stuff, we're storing our scanner inputs into a variable. So let me show you this in the code. Actually, let me do this one. So right here, std_in, that's basically our console. So I'm going to say hello, everyone. My name is Professor Brown. This is Java. Hello world. I don't know, I'm just putting random stuff. Okay. So this is our console. If we want to read in from the console, the first thing we must do is create our scanner object. Scanner input equals new scanner. That's the first thing we must do. System.in. And one thing I didn't say before is because we're using the scanner object, it's not just built in. We can't just, it is built in, but we can't just use it in our program, just, willy-nilly. We do have to tell our program we are using the scanner. So in order to do that, we must import it. Import, it's at java.util.scanner. That tells our program that we're going to use this scanner, right? This scanner class. So now we can actually use it in our program. Before, if I just did this without that line, I would get an error, right? It says cannot find symbol and then class scanner. So now I add that line in there and it tells it, okay, that's where to look for that class. All right, so let's create a string. String line. Let's say line equals input.next. Let's just start there. So line should equal hello when I run this. So here's our console that we're reading in. So the first thing is we create our scanner. So input points to a scanner. And then we set line equal to input.next. You see line equals hello. Stop me if this is not making sense, okay?
Yeah. How this might sound silly, but how do you make the words purple?
Where? Over here?
Like, yeah.
It does it by default.
Oh, okay. So
I was gonna say, it makes any Java keywords purple.
okay, so the keywords are what you've already typed in previously.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that's why my stuff is not. All right.
And notice that this new is a keyword as well, so it's purple.
Okay.
When I click visualize, I think they all go black though. Yeah, they're all black now.
Okay, so the way you're typing this in, would it be the same as JGrasp?
Yes.
In a sense, I guess.
Yeah. So
Because I'm trying to put it in, but I don't have the one that we did it from last class, so I guess nothing is popping up.
So are you doing it in the browser or in JGrasp?
JGrasp.
JGrasp. So in JGrasp, we would still do import java.util.scanner, same thing. And we would still do scanner input equals new scanner, system.in. It's still the same thing. And then we create our string line. The only difference is you can't really see what's going on like you can in the visualizer. So if I do this line equals input.next, you won't see anything happening. Right? If I compile this, if I run it, One, you just see this blinking cursor down here. It's waiting for me to type something in. If I type in hello, you see I type in hello down here. In JGraphs, you won't see what's happening. It just ends. It reads it in from the console, but you won't see it doing that. That's programming, you know. It's doing all that in the back end in memory. So the visualizer shows you what's going on. So now we see line equals hello, right? And you'll
Okay, so
go ahead.
go ahead.
Go
No, go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say, and you'll do most of your programs in JGraphs, and when you submit them, they'll be from JGraphs. But I just want to show you what's going on in memory using the visualizer.
Okay, so Friday for lab, are we going to like make our own like thing like this from scratch?
Yes.
Okay, so whatever we didn't really pick up on Monday and kind of today, we'll kind of go over on Friday as we do
Correct.
the lab.
Correct.
Okay, all right, perfect, thank you.
All right. So again, if we have line equals input.next, line will equal hello. If I modify this a little bit and I say line equals input.next again, then I'm going to say line equals input.next line. I'm gonna read the whole line. Again, this is my console. So if I visualize this, the first time line equals hello. We're reading it hello. Then line equals everyone. We're reading everyone. Then I read it again. Okay. Well, line equals. So at the end of every line, there's a little empty string. So it actually read that empty string. So I'm gonna do this again. Line equals input.next line. All right. So if I visualize this, so it goes hello, everyone. Then it reads the little empty string at the end of this. There is an empty string there. And then it's going to read the next line. My name is Professor Brown. So that's the difference between .next and .next line. .next just gets the next word. .next line gets the whole line. Okay? All right, let's continue. All right, so for strings, which is what line is, I'm sorry, line is a string. There's one main thing you could do with strings, which is concatenation. Basically, add two strings together. So if I have hello and I have world, if I do hello plus world, the result would be hello world. It concatenates them together. Concatenation, basically adding them together to make one string. Okay. So if I have this code right here, if I have string line, I said line equal to this, line equal to is, line equal to an example, line equal to a variable, line equal to assignment. And then finally, if I do line equals line plus string, all right, you'll see what happens. So the first time we create our line, it equals null. Then we set it equal to this, set it equal to is, an example, a variable, assignment. And this next statement sets line equal to the current value of line plus 3. So the current value of line was assignment. If I concatenate 3 to that, it should say assignment 3. All right. So if I copy this into the visualizer, you'll see what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, when you copy it over, it messes up the quotation marks. So I have to adjust these. and we don't have any console, we're not reading in. So if I visualize this, so the first thing, we create a line variable, then we set it equal to this, right? Is equal to this, and then is an example. And you see the value of line changes each time. It changes each time. We're just, that line variable is just to store some type of data. Right now we're storing an example. The next time we're storing a variable. The next time is assignment. And then we get to this statement right here. We're setting line equal to the current value of line plus 3. So the current value is assignment, and we concatenate 3 onto that. So assignment 3. We basically added 3 to line. And then we're done. Okay. All right. Here's another example. So we have line, and then we have line 2. Line 2 now equals 3. Okay. So now we're concatenating line, and you see over in memory, line is still assignment, line 2 is 3. If we concatenate those two together, line will equal assignment 3. So let me show you that in the visualizer. So if we create string line 2 equals 3. Now we say line equals line concatenate with, let's just do line 2. And you'll see that they'll be bunched up next to each other. So we create this, we create string 2 or line 2 equals just 3. Now we set line equal to the current value of line plus line 2. And you see it's kind of bunched up on itself. There's no spacing at all. So if we want to add that spacing, okay, Siri. If we want to add that spacing, we can concatenate a space in there. And now we have a space. So if we visualize this, again, line equals this is an example of variable assignment. Line 2 equals 3. And now we're going to concatenate all of this together. Line plus space plus line 2. And you see now our spacing looks good. I added a space in there. I concatenated a space in between those two variables. Any questions? Or is it so much you don't even know where to start a question?
Yeah, it's a lot.
All right. That's okay. When we get in the lab and you actually started to program, it'll lock in a little bit better. And I mean, I encourage you all to program with me as I'm doing this so that you can see in your own code what's going on. But once we get in the lab, I'll be able to help you as you start your programs. All right, let's keep going. So with numbers, obviously with numbers, you can add them, subtract them, multiply, divide, and then you can get the remainder of something. So, which is actually in coding, it's called the modulo, but basically it's the remainder. So if I do 10 modulo 3, right? 3 goes into 10 3 times. So the remainder is 1. Okay. Division, multiplication, subtraction, addition, all of those work as expected. Right? There's nothing special about those. So let's do this example. We have an int number 1. So number 1 is a whole number. It's an int. Int number 2. Number 2 is going to be a whole number. Then we have double number 3. It's going to be a decimal number. Double number 4. That's going to be a decimal number as well. Okay. So int number 1 equals 7. Number 2 equals 4. Number 3, 2.55. Then finally, number 4, 3.21. So we're setting these variables equal to these numbers. Okay.
So is this kind of how like calculators work?
is exactly how calculators work. Calculators are programmed to receive input from you as the user and then do whatever equation that you want it to do. Right? So technically, if you learn how to program, you could write your own calculator. All right. So now let's do number 1 equals number 1 minus 5. Okay. So the current value of number 1 is 7, right? So 7 minus 5 equals 2. So in memory, now number 1 equals 2. Cool. Now we do number 1 equals number 1 plus number 2. So because the current value of number 1 is 2, the current value of number 2 is 4, we're going to set 2 plus 4, which is 6, equal to number 1. So now number 1 equals 6. Okay? And that's the slideshow for today. So let's show you what I'm talking about. Let's edit the code. And let's just review. Let's review everything we've done, and then I'll go over that last number. So the first thing we did was how to read from the console. And I'll do this in JGrasp. So the first thing we did was how to read from the console, right? We're reading in from the console, and we're going to store it in to a variable. So the first thing, and I'll start from scratch, from 0, okay? Again, the first thing we need to do is our public class, and I'm going to name it lecture 5. All right, that's the first thing we always need. We need public class.
Oh, wait, well, question,
Right.
sorry. This little bracket, sorry, this this bracket thing that did you just add that yourself?
I did, right here.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's you shift and the button next to P.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's the first thing you need to do. And then the second thing is our main, public static void main string args. This format will always be the case for whatever main you create in Java. A public static void main string. So you'll see that every time I do an example. And it's necessary because that's the first method your program will go to. We do an opening bracket for that. Then if we want to read in from the console, we need a scanner. So scanner input equals new scanner. System.in. So we create the scanner in order to read from the console. In order to use our scanner, we must import it. Import java.util.scanner. Java.util is the package, or basically the folder that our scanner is in. And then obviously we're going to use a scanner class. And so keep in mind, when I say scanner, that's actually a class. It's a class with code in it that tells Java how to read in from the console. So then to actually read in from the console, we will use our identifier, or the name of our scanner, .next, to read in one word, or .next line, to read in a line. Input.next line. Input.next. I'm just going to put some random code here, next line. Okay?
Also, question, is there a reason why you're double spacing?
No, there's no reason.
No? Okay.
Well, there's a reason. I'm going to add some more code in here, but for now, there's no reason. All right, so now we do need a closing bracket for our main and a closing bracket for our class. Okay, those are necessary. Then I can compile this Hopefully there aren't any errors. So it compiles, operation complete. Then I can run it. You see I'm running it down here, and I'll clear this. And it's just blinking. That's because it's waiting for an input. So I can say, this is some input. And it read it in. I'm not storing it anywhere, it just read it in. I do it again. Hello world. It read it in. Again, I'm not storing it anywhere, so you're not going to see anything right now. Input.next, I'm going to put, this is real programming. So it did input.next, it read in this, and then it did input.next line immediately after that. So it read in the rest of the line, and the program ended. Okay. All right, that makes sense? So again, it's not doing anything with this. So let's store these lines in a variable. So let's create one for each line. So string line 1 equals this. String line 2 equals that. String line 3 equals input.next. And string line 4 equals input.next line. So line 1 should equal, this is some input. Line 2 should equal hello world. Line 3, this. And then line 4 is real programming. Okay? So we read all that in from the console. And just so you can see what I'm talking about, because JGrass will not show you, I'm going to put this in the visualizer so that you see what I'm talking about. All right. And from JGrass, I should be able to just copy and paste this into here. Yep. All right. And then what I wrote in from the console, I'm going to copy this as well. Right here. All right. So first thing is we create our scanner. That's what I created, our input. Then we read it in line 1. So line 1 should equal, this is some input. Line 1 indeed equals, this is some input. I'm zooming. Line 2 should equal, hello W world. Line 3, I'm saying input.next. So it should just equal this. That's correct. Now line 4 should equal the rest of this line, is real programming. And there you go. It reads in is real programming. And our program ends. Again, in JGrasp, you will not see that. It'll run, it'll ask for input. This is some input, it reads it. I type in hello world, it reads it. This is real programming. It reads that as well, and then it ends. We're not doing anything with it, okay? So now if I add, let's say, string new line equals line 2 plus line 4. I'm concatenating them, right? So if I'm concatenating those, I do want to put a space in between them because it will look pretty ugly all jumbled up. But line 2 equals hello W world. Line 4 equals is real programming. So I would assume if I print out system.out.println new line, if I print that out, it should equal hello world is real programming, right? Because I'm concatenating line 2 and line 3. So let's see if that's true. This is some input. hello W world. This is real programming. All right, I'm printing out new lines. So new line is line 2 plus line 4. Line 2 is hello world, if you remember. Line 4 is real programming. So I'm assuming we should print out hello world is real programming. And that's what we printed out. It concatenated those two lines together. If I show you this in the visualizer, string new line equals line 2 plus line 4. And I don't have the system.out it because we can see, but I will print line, new line. And if we visualize this, I need a semicolon right here. If we visualize this, again, I go forward, we do all the same things we just did. So we have line 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I create a new line equal to line 2 plus line 4, or concatenate them. So new line equals hello world is real programming. Then I can print that out. Okay. So that's talking about how to read in from the console, strings, and how to concatenate strings. Okay. And again, when we go over this in class and with each assignment, it'll reinforce what I'm talking about in class. And so the last thing now are just numbers, right? How do we work with numbers? So we'll get rid of this scanner stuff and we'll just create some numbers. So let's say int number 1 equals, again, an int is a whole number. Int number 2 equals, I don't know, something random. Int number 3, actually, let's do double. Double, again, is decimal numbers. Number 3 equals 9. Now, if you notice, 9 is a whole number, but Java is smart enough to convert that to 9.0, make it a decimal. Double number 3. So, with that being said, it's implied any integer is a double, right? However, doubles are not integers. If you try to convert a double to an integer, it'll cut off everything after the decimal. However, if you convert an integer to a double, it'll just add a 0.0 to that integer. Equals point that. All right, so we have 4 numbers here. Actually, let's make this a little bit simpler because we're going to do these additions in our head. So let's make this 9, let's make this 5.5 and make this 4.5. Okay. So if I do double number 5 equals number 3 minus number 4. That answer, at least we would think, would be 5.5 minus 4.5, which should be 1.0. So if I do system.out.println number 5, I'm just going to print out the value of number 5. If I run this, 1.0. If I add these, it should be 10.0. 10.0. If I divide them, so if I divide number 3 by number 4, I have no idea what the result is, but it would be 5.5 divided by 4.5.
Professor?
Yep.
I'm getting error.
What is your error?
Oh, Java practice. Well, that's the name of my paper, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It says error, semicolon, expected.
On what line? It doesn't say a line? Then you're missing a semicolon at the end of one of your lines.
But they all have semi. I think I see it. Hold on. Yeah, I'm still getting an error.
Do you have all your brackets? Closing brackets, I mean.
Yeah, I have all of them.
Then it's a semicolon. So typically, if you're missing a semicolon, try to compile it. It highlights the line that it's talking about.
Yeah, it's that line that is highlighted on your own too.
Then you're missing the semicolon at the end.
Hmm?
And that should fix your error. Or it's a semicolon for a line above it, one of the two. But usually it highlights the line. All right. All right, so same thing. If I do int, I'm going to do number 1 plus number 2. That should equal 15, right? Because number 1 is 5, number 2 is 10, 15. If I do number 1 minus number 2, that should be -5. There you go. So again, variables are really good for storing some type of data, right? If we want to store a line, if we want to store a name, whatever it is, we use a variable. If we want to store numbers and letters and characters, whatever, we use variables. And so that's what I'm using today. I'm using variables to store all that data in my program so that I can use it later for other equations, right? And then we read in from the console. That allows our users to input some type of data into our program. Okay. So again, on Friday in the lab, we'll actually be able to, I'll be able to sit there with you and help you through these programs and hopefully explain some concepts that you are a little fuzzy on. So don't get discouraged. Programming, although it can be challenging at times, is very much learnable. Okay. All right, with that, that ends it for today. If there are no other questions, I will see you on Friday in the lab, Yancey 119.